Actually, I'm going to zoom in just a hair on my side. There we go. See what that kind of match you a little bit.
Cool.
All right. Welcome to a Father's Flame podcast today. I'm excited to introduce my guest, Matt Beaudreau. He is the founder of Apogee Strong. He has a podcast, Essential 11. Matt, welcome to a Father's Flame today.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here, brother. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm just excited to network and connect and give a voice to men who are like out there serving other men, right? And trying to make this nation and then this world like a better place by like almost like fixing families. And it seems like one of the biggest things you could do is fix the man in the home. So
You nailed it, man. It starts at home. And it's, as Jordan Peterson always talks about, you want to go out and fix the world, and that's great, but start by fixing yourself. And we're really talking about the same thing, man. Get inside, fix yourself, fix the family. If everybody would do that, everything else would kind of fall into place,
yeah. Well, before we get into kind of where you're at today, why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself, Matt?
Yeah. Give you kind of the high level and then go anywhere and everywhere, that you want to go. So born and raised, was a California guy, born and raised in the Bay Area, and grew up typical sort of middle class sort of deal. Was in an interesting part of California where I had, friends that were, ended up going to prison and being in gangs. And I had friends that were extraordinarily wealthy and everything in between, and I was certainly not a gang member, and I was certainly not extraordinarily wealthy, but learned to get along with everybody in that regard. We had a really interesting kind of childhood in that way, and I'm pretty thankful for that. But played the school game well, and I always say that specifically because it is a game, and I figured out early that it was a game. So I played the school game well, but I was more in tune with girls and sports, and like that was the thing. And so graduate, and it's like, well, everybody's going to college, I guess I'll do that too. And got better at girls, better at sports, still got my straight A's. But I turned down a job at the White House coming out of college. And so then I went, okay, cool, man. I have no idea who I am or what I have to offer the world. I know how to play school. And that's all I know how to do. So worked a few odd jobs, and each one of those led to a different opportunity. And I found myself at Stanford University, where I got to see the game from the other side, at a high level. And that really started the wheels spinning. I started putting two and two together of, okay, well, I always knew the school was a game. Now I'm seeing it from this side at a high level. Naively, I thought, okay, well, I'll go change it by being a teacher. Became a public school teacher. Went, well, this isn't right either. So I became a public school administrator. Went, well, this is really not about kids. Left public schools and private schools to go launch my own series of schools. So I launched a number of schools in California. I've helped entrepreneurs now launch almost 300 schools around the world. And in the process of that, I helped my friend Tim Kennedy launch a school in Cedar Park, Texas. And Tim and I started talking about, what we wanted to do to help young men and to help fathers and to really just pour extra fuel on those flames. And so that's where we launched Apogee Strong, the mentorship programs for young men and men. And we're still rocking and rolling from there, man. So there's a whole lot of time, decade mistakes and experiences in what I just said right there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested, and we'll get into the Apogee thing, but because you said the school game, like that, you were like figuring that out, or you're seeing something about it that it was like a game. What do you mean by that?
Oh yeah. So I saw it early on. I tell people I very clearly, one of my earliest memories, I started kindergarten when I was 4. Because I have a late November birthday. So started kindergarten when I was 4 years old. And I remember sitting in the classroom, and I remember being grouped together. I remember them the teachers separating us and putting us at these various tables. And I remember looking around the tables at 4 years old going, okay, that over there is the group that they think needs the most help. That group over there, they think needs a little bit less. we are the group they think are the best. It was something to do with reading. And I remember specifically being the red group. And I remember going, okay, this is all the best readers. So this is what they're doing. They're grouping us together, right? And I could see that pattern at 4 years old. And I continued to watch and started to look for those patterns. So then it became just a game to me. Well, how do I get straight A's without doing anything? And so I very early on figured out how to game the system of school. I figured out how to get straight A's without really putting any effort in, without doing homework, without, like, I just knew what teachers wanted when they wanted it. And so I figured that out early, and I used that throughout my entire schooling career so that I could just focus on, again, sports, girls, the other things that I wanted to focus on. And it wasn't until I got into where I was working there where I realized, well, that game is intentional. There's actually a long tail history of that game, and it has nothing to do with educating human beings. And so that's why, once I had kids of my own, there was no way they were going to enter that game. We were either going to home educate or I was going to build something they could go to. There was no way they were ever touching that game.
Wow. So you're saying school isn't even to educate?
It's almost diametrically opposed.
Which that's like, I mean, you're literally just saying the opposite of what we all think it's for, right?
For sure. That's exactly right. And I love the way you frame that, actually, because I always ask people, what should education be for? Like, define that. And I went through the system. I was not just through the system as a student, but I went through the system as a credentialed teacher. And we're not asked when you're getting your credential, what should education be for? You're taught how to perpetuate a system. And we just assume, because we've all been born into this, where, well, our parents went to school, we go to school, we're going to send our kids to school. You just assume that it's something you do. And you kind of, without really thinking about it, you accept this theory that, well, there were likely some sort of experts somewhere who put this system together because this is what people need and when they need it, and relates to child development of some sort. And you're partially right if you think that, because there were experts somewhere and they did put it together, but they were experts in how to break a human, how to get a human to be blindly obedient, how to get a human to grow up as a slave, and how to make good workers for the Industrial Revolution. And so, yeah, they put it together very, very intentionally, and we fall into that, and we're trapped by it.
Yeah, that's deep. That's kind of probably like almost like a red pill to swallow for some people who might just be hearing this for the first time. So.
People don't. Yes, it's a rough thing, and so I always, whenever I talk about these kind of things on shows,
yeah,
I want people to understand that just because you send your kids, you've never heard this before, and you send your kids to what I call conveyor belt schools. I'm not saying you're a bad person, you're a bad parent. I'm on your side. You're born into this cult. You don't realize you're born into the cult of schooling. You don't understand. And it's this concept of birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. You're born into this cage. So I'm not saying anything is wrong with you. If you're a teacher or you're an administrator in this system and you're in there for altruistic reasons, you really want to help the kids, man, I'm not against you. I am for you. Please understand, though, the system is designed to go against people. And that's what I will forever rage against, is that machine, until more and more people realize that it's against you. It's your enemy.
Yeah, I think, for me and my family, like, we kind of came to some of the same conclusions, and probably took me longer. I'm a product of the public school.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, and then I went to college, but more just to play soccer and party until, I became a Christian. And then everything changed for me to live by values and different things. But it was really, to me, just praying and seeing, actually, some of the smartest guys I knew had some amount of homeschooling when I was growing up. And I felt like God's leading, like we chose from the beginning to homeschool. I was like, oh, this is going to be way better education. Rachel, you love them way more than any other teacher, and them spending time with you is going to be more advantageous than anyone else, or a classroom of 30 kids. And they're probably going to be a lot smarter, and we can get this done a lot quicker with less time.
Good for you. That's awesome.
So we kind of jumped on it, not from like the perspective, like that you're saying that we saw that holes. And
Yeah,
my wife was a teacher as well, public school
got
teacher. Her family's in that. My sister's a public school teacher, but
it.
um, I just saw it from the perspective of like, well, let me think about like, what do I use from what I learned today, and what's served me the most. Dude, I don't know. I think it's the things that I was passionate about in self-learning,
Bingo.
things that whether it was entrepreneurship, whether it was the Bible, like I got real passionate about that. And that served me the most to this day, probably the last 15, 20 years than
That's the way we're
anything.
built. It's
Yeah.
the way we're built. We are going to be served best by part of like what you talked about. What are the things we're most excited about? Because we're naturally going to go after that. And what are the things that we need? Education is wildly personal. So to assume that everybody starts the same thing, same time, it's this narrow scope of academia that is somehow going to translate into success for everybody in all these wildly different areas of life is silly, right? Educational is wildly personal. It's continuous. So we're born and raised California, my wife and I both, and we've only been out of California for a year, right? So we live on a farm now up at the top of a mountain. We were in the Bay Area, we were in the city, right? And then we were in Sacramento, we were in the city. We didn't have to be educated on growing our own food, processing animals, electric fencing, being a lumberjack and falling trees, wells, simple pumps. I didn't have to be educated on any of that because it didn't matter to my day-to-day life. Well, it does now. And so I have to be able to educate myself on that now, right? And because my kids also live on this farm, they're also educated on this now because it matters now. It matters to them, right? So part of being educated is being able to get from A to B, going, I want to get at point B, I'm at point A. Where do I find the information? How do I learn what it is I need to learn when I need to learn it? And then it's also being able to ditch old information that's no longer relevant. How do I unlearn things that don't matter anymore? And then how do I make a game plan for myself, knowing myself, where else do I want to go? So what else do I need, right? It's this wildly personal thing. And school is anything but personal. It's very conveyor belt in that regard. And that's a big part of the danger. It's not just the woke agenda or whatever, and that's a part of it. There's issues that are going on there for sure. But it's the design of school in general that teaches you academia above all else, put that on a pedestal, blind obedience, just deal with the same people of your own age. And we're going to, by the way, be the authorities that are going to tell you what to do and when to do it for 18 years. Well, now that's your habit that's built in. You're looking for somebody else to tell you what to do in life forever. That's a really hard thing for people to get out of.
Man, that's interesting. And then you had said earlier, like just the word like slavery, like it's creating this, like if you think of like slavery as like a job, right? In a sense, because that's what you have to do.
Mhm.
It's almost like you're born into this business that your parents did it, their parents did it,
Correct.
at least the last 100 years.
Yep.
And so you just you just go there. Like your parents don't question it. So then why would you? And then
You just accept it as something that you accept it as something that you need,
yeah.
right? Which is an interesting thing. So I was talking to some people yesterday, and I wish I could remember who said this to me a while back, because I want to give them credit, but I very much have come to believe that it's true. Somebody said to me a while back, it would only take one generation of sending kids to school at 6 months of age before the entire population believed kids would never learn to walk unless they went to school.
Interesting.
Right? Think about that. And so I was talking to somebody yesterday who was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I think, she has a 1-year-old, and she's like, I think, okay, yeah, I think we're going to homeschool, but I got to figure something out at some point, because she's not going to be able to learn to read. So I don't know. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you talking about? Is she walking right now? Yeah, she's walking. Cool. Where did you take her? Where did you take her for that? Well, I didn't take her anywhere. Right. Okay. Well, does she talk right now? Yeah, a little bit. And she has over 100 signs. Cool. Where did you take her for that? Right. You're always and forever educating. And by the way, teaching somebody to read is not hard either. You got to make reading fun. School, actually, the way school uses reading is they actually kill the love of reading. And it's designed to really kill the love of reading altogether. So the way school does it, no, it's not hard, and it's going to be a natural process for you.
How does it kill the love of reading? And can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, it intentionally it intentionally starts you far too early without interest. So reading has a lot more to do with interest and a little bit to do with biology than people want to give credit. Girls tend to, again, blanket statement, it's not always the case. Girls tend to get excited about reading earlier and want to gravitate towards that, where boys tend to get more excited about the building side or mathematical side of things earlier on. And they kind of gravitate towards that. Girls gravitate towards reading and literature more often than not, right? It's not a blanket statement. But they'll do it at different times developmentally too. Girls are more likely to get interested in that a little bit earlier. Boys aren't really usually gravitate towards reading until maybe, 6, 7, if you're going to do a blanket sort of statement. Well, schools go, oh no, everybody's got to learn. You got to start learning now. 4 years old, 5 years old, and they make it a chore. And they make it something where they don't get your love of reading, stoked. They don't stoke that flame by telling you interesting stories and just reading to you or reading with you, and then having you engage in that and having you become the protagonist in there and having you have to make those hard decisions. And so you start seeing reading as this potential window into adventure, right? Like that's how you actually get somebody excited about reading. School's like, nope, you're going to read this and you're going to regurgitate what you read. We're going to put these sounds together. We're going to do all that. Like, and the kids are like, I just want to go play, man. So you start to tell them early on that reading is a chore. Reading kind of sucks, and it's something you have to do for school, because if you read this, you're going to have to just kind of regurgitate stuff for an authority figure later, right? That's the habit that you start to build into their mind. So it's not any wonder that the majority of students come out of school and they don't have any desire to keep reading. They're not excited about it. They can't really read at a high level. And by high level, I mean, they sit and wrestle with the material and they think and they put themselves in that, right? And they want to challenge themselves with higher level material. Like, how many students come out of high school and that's their mentality around reading? Almost none. And again, that's part of the design, is to screw it up.
Yeah, you're talking about, that's how I see myself. I'm like thinking about how I read. I'm like, dude, I just wanted out of school and I did it. But there was some times I got into some books. I was like, wow, that was really good. But I already had the habit of like, I didn't like it.
Exactly. And it's really a hard habit to break, man. We've got more dads in our dad's program telling us already, some of them started it in January, right? And they're like, I've already read, it's April right now. I've already read more books this year than I read, the past decade.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. Like, I think that's a piece that I never saw it. Like you're saying, like schools, like crushing that. And like, but I don't know. To me, that's like one of the ways we advance, where we're reading wisdom from all these other people from how many hundreds of years.
Man, it's the primary way. When we talk about getting an education, like we're in a really an advantageous time. If you have access to a library and you have access to the internet, well, you have access to all information of all time.
Yeah.
So we're not suffering from a lack of information. We're suffering from a lack of being educated. Part of that is being inspired. And part of that is knowing how to self-educate. And books are a huge part of that. Classics are a huge part of that. And it doesn't have to be just nonfiction stories. I mean, fictional stories can be a phenomenal thing. You start diving into the material and you start looking for, the symbology that's there and the patterns that are there, because they represent real decisions you'll have to make in your life. And you start getting those reps in, right? Like we all, you said you played soccer, right? Well, you didn't just step onto a field and you were really good. You had to practice, right? You practice the skills. Well, reading isn't just about reading words and being able to spell. Reading is about getting the reps in for life. You're putting yourself in these other heroes' shoes in a safe environment where you're getting the repetition of going, ooh, they had to make this decision and look at the ripple effects that took place because they had this sort of relationship. This happened, good or bad. You're putting yourself in that scenario and going, oh, what would I have done? What could I have done? What would I do if I saw this similar? You're getting the reps in on how to lead a heroic life. It's why it's so dangerous when we take away the love of reading for our young people like we do in school. It's a dangerous thing because of that.
Wow. I like that. Living a heroic life. Yeah, because you know that every man, every boy wants to be that, you know, and I know Wild at Heart, John Eldridge brought that out a little bit.
Yep.
There's these pieces to the core of every man, right?
Yep.
And school wasn't designed to like serve that piece. It's like, no, it's cranking out this system of people that it needs to keep itself going.
100%. It's not even, and that's not even just not designed to serve it. It's designed to chop it off, man. It's designed to cut them off at the knees. It's designed to take that young man and go, hey, sit and be bored. And if you don't want to sit and be bored at 5, you know, and listen to somebody drone on where an adult wouldn't even want to sit and listen to this, they'd be bored out of their mind. Well, then we're going to say that you have a methamphetamine deficiency and we're going to make sure we get you medicated, right? And just make you acquiesce early and often. We're breaking the wild stallion as early as possible to make them a show pony for the rest of the, you know, the 18 years. And they come out and we're like, now go run a race. Give me a break. You just freaking cut them off at the knees.
Wow. We're saying there's something wrong with you when really there's something so right with you. Like you run with those. So even with what you've shared already, it's like, dude, we got to hear, what is apogee? Like what is it, Matt? What are you guys creating? That's like, I'm not saying it's the antithesis of public school, but that it is a better avenue. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, we've got a number of things that we are working on here. So we've got mentorship programs, and we have the full-on K through 12 disruption, right? So I've built schools prior to this that are, and I don't even like to use the word school. They're centers for education. You know, these were K through 12. These were for boys and girls that I've built, and again, a vastly different style of education. It's a microcosm of the real world where young men and young women can go and actually learn who they are. They can gain self-awareness. They can gain self-confidence. So we built these schools here. What we're doing on the apogee side, on the school side, it's going to look very, very similar to that, but we're going to have even more guided mentorship. But apogee started as a virtual mentorship program. So we started out with just young men, roughly about 12 or 13 on purpose. We didn't want to go any younger than that for a number of reasons. One of those being developmental. 12 or 13 up to about 18 or 19, young men in every state, young men in about 20 different countries. And we are giving them a very intentional roadmap to become educated, not schooled, educated. So they've got a very specific 12 months. And over the course of this 12 months, they are taking on various projects, challenges, and readings that are going to give them experiences that they're not going to get in school. They're going to have interviews that they're conducting with, with other CEOs and military and law enforcement and fire. They're going to go out and have sales challenges. They're going to have public speaking challenges. They're going to have mentorship challenges of their own where they're going forward and mentoring. They're going to have service-based challenges. They're going to have all of these things that they've got to do over the course of those 12 months. And they're going to document all of those things and create a digital portfolio around that. While they're doing that, they've got a private platform that they are operating within where they're getting daily content, daily videos, daily articles from myself, from Tim, as well as interaction with the other young men in the program. And so we've got graduate young men who have done the whole 12 months, who are staying in perpetuity, and they're leading other young men, calling them to a higher purpose, going, look, man, here's how it's working out in my life. Here's what you need to do. So we've got young men leading other young men, right? And calling them to more maturity. And then while we're doing all of that, every single week, there's also a live call where we are bringing in the best of the best of the best of men on the planet. We're bringing in, you know, billionaire CEOs and famous actors and professional athletes and musicians and, you know, Navy SEALs and admirals. And we're bringing in all these guys. The through line is these are all really good men who are having an impact, and our young men are talking with them directly so they can get the patterns of success. What does a mature, character driven, service driven man look like today? What is he doing? How did he get there? What does that roadmap look like? So these young men have a very specific journey that they are on. Now, this journey, and they create that digital portfolio. If they pour into those 12 months, they stay in perpetuity. There's no charge at that point. Like, they just stay with us. We keep pouring into them. And what's happening is they're utilizing that to do whatever they want to do. If they want to go to college, they're utilizing this to go to college. We actually have some colleges that have given us blanket scholarships. I'm talking like 20 grand off the top. Any young man that comes out of Apogee, automatic entrance into our university, and a blanket $20,000 scholarship off the top, because we know what kind of character and values these guys are coming in with. We've got internship, apprenticeship programs, same thing. Scholarship off the top. We'll make sure this young man's debt free going into this apprenticeship program. We've got organizations that are reaching out going, hey, we want a young man out of your program. Here's what we do. Do you have anybody that's interested in this? We got a young man who's moving right now from Florida to Texas. He's not even 18 yet, and he's got an almost 6-figure job offer just because of the network he built while he was there. So we are providing them with the opportunity, not the guarantee. They've got to put in the work.
Yeah.
Right. But it's the opportunity to gain a real education from the best men on the planet, and to go forward and you know, become a leader. We say Apogee Strong, leaders on purpose, because you have to be intentional about that. So that's what we started for our young men in that age range. But we understand there are more young men that we need to, you know, on the earlier side, on the later side, and that we have grown men who also were never given these opportunities. So that's why we launched, and this all comes back around full circle, but it's why we launched the dad's part of this as well. So we've got men who we are bringing through a very specific 12 months as well. Same deal, projects, challenges, readings, private platform, weekly calls with the best of the best of the best. And for these guys, they are able to, when they are done, affiliate with us and launch their own Apogee affiliate in their community. So what are they launching? They're launching coaching businesses for other men, or they are launching K through 12 campuses in their communities, or they are launching something for young men in their communities, and they can go younger than we will do on the virtual side, right? They can go in and replace Boy Scouts in their community and do something that the young men actually need. And we're giving the dads, you know, essentially a business in a box sort of deal, and be able to affiliate in that way. So it's a huge mission that we're on with all of these, you know, fingers, but they're all same fingers, you know, different fingers, but same hands.
Gotcha. Wow, this is good.
There's a lot.
That's a lot. So mentorship, that's for like anyone who can afford it, like, or is there scholarships for that piece?
That's a great question, man. So that's where the Apogee Strong Foundation comes in as well. So we've got our 501c3. You know, the downside of any kind of privatized education is that there's a cost associated with it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, those are all, but we keep everything. I mean, $1,000 for the young men for the year. And then again, free in perpetuity thereafter, $2,000 for the dads, you know, and so it's not overwhelming as far as the cost, but the Apogee Strong Foundation partially exists to scholarship people for that as well. So if anybody, you know, is looking for a cause to get behind, this is one we're excited about.
I love this. I think this is needed like so badly. I mean, this is part of why I even have this podcast. I'm like, where do you even make an impact in the United States with where we're heading, what we're dealing with? It's, I think it always goes back to, and I told you before we started, like, I'm a believer. I go back to the Bible because
Yeah.
I'm not the smartest guy, but I've learned a lot from it. And
Mhm.
it's like, so God has designed this family, right? And if you break down man, like in the Hebrew, like in even the most ancient pictographic Hebrew, it's like it starts with like Adam,
Yep.
an ox head, the A, that
Mhm.
literally means, like, have you ever seen like
The
a male ox or
yes.
male bull? It's like you
Bingo.
look at that neck and you're like, that's strength. Like,
Bingo.
and there's other pieces to it, but it's like strength.
Bingo.
And then I think it's bet is the next letter, and that's like it's a tent. If you looked like over the top of it, it's like
Yeah.
strength of the house is really what it means. Like, um,
Yes.
and dude, I just see it over and
Yes.
over. Like, if you break the man, like the house is crumbles. But if the man is strong, like if he's that bull, he's got the horns, he's got the neck muscles, and dude, what predators coming in to go deal with that thing? They're not. He
Bingo.
protects the herd, and it's that protection mentality that I think God designed into man.
That's right.
But it's not that you're just like, if the bull's just this angry crazy bull, then that's a whole nother problem. But you need to be
Hold on.
a disciplined, have restraint, have boundaries, and there's a time for protection, but you don't use your strength in every moment of your life.
Of course.
It's just there when needed, and it's protection, it's leadership, spiritual leadership for men. So
It's
that changes families, good families, and strong men. I think would change this nation. So like that's why I love what you're doing, because when I'm like looking at what's happening like in Chicago like this last
yep.
week, and you look at this like just young kids that I'm like, where are the parents? Where are the fathers that
That's
say,
right.
no way, kid, you're a part of that. You're going to pay, you're going to get disciplined. You're going to get, whatever it is like that their house does. It's like, no, you don't get to act like that. And,
That's right.
this guy, Eric Beck, that I interviewed, months ago, he said there was a problem with, and I think it was African, province that was dealing with these weird elephants like coming in and just actually attacking the city and doing just destructive things. And I'm like, it reminds me of what we see in Chicago, right?
Mm.
This last week. And it's like this expert they brought in, he's like, oh yeah, I know how to fix this. It's easy. Boom. They airlift this massive alpha elephant, put him in the city. Not one of those adolescent elephants was um, doing any of that because he kept them in line. And it's like there is a structure and a strength to strong men, right? And I'm not saying just even physically, but strong men in character, in word, in deed as well, will
Right.
affect the younger men. And so I think we need these schools. Like I love the foundation option that you're going to support these young kids. The cost, don't worry about it. Get in the program, get some core values, right? Because a lot of
Yes.
us weren't given them. I,
That's right.
you know,
That's
I
exactly
think
right.
a lot of families just go like, well, you're just in the family, just do what we do. Like you don't. And if someone gave you core values as, in your family, that's amazing leadership.
And
Um,
the thing is, your kids will always do so. Part of what I love so much of what you're talking about here is do what we do is the default. So my kids are going to do what I do far before they do what I say. So I better make sure I'm the person that I want them to be.
yeah,
Right? I better make sure I'm living in the way that I want them to live because they are going to do what I'm going to do. So part of what you see with Chicago and all these other places, we've got two major epidemics going on. One, we've got a fatherless home crisis where a lot of these, I guarantee a lot of those people out there in Chicago didn't have dads in the home.
yeah,
And we have the crisis of perpetual boys who are pretending to be dads in the home. So they fathered the children, but they're in there living as perpetual boys. They're not paying attention. They might be physically present, but they're not actually present, and they're not doing anything that looks like leadership, right? And in fact, it's kind of funny you mentioned elephants because the woods. How do you train elephants? Well, you take them when they're babies and you tie them up to a post, and they physically know that they shouldn't be tied to a post. They know they should be free, so they rip and they pull, but then they finally acquiesce and go, I'm not strong enough. I can't pull away from this. And the problem is when they're adults, you can take a same tiny little rope and you can tie it up to a post, and they're going to assume that they're stuck and they won't even try anymore because they've been mentally broken. Right. And so we're cutting our young men off at the knees. School's a big part of that. We're mentally breaking them early so that later on, not only are they, metaphorically tied to that, that rope from society standards, and they just acquiesce and feel like, well, I'm not made for anything else. Now they're turning around and doing the same thing with their own kids, and the cycle continues, and those are the cycles that we are breaking by what we're doing. We're making sure men that are in the home are leading in a strong way, and then we're making sure that we raise these great young men so they're not broken men later on. Right, it's all those things. And I love that you're talking about the design too, because you mentioned Hebrew too, and you look at God's name in Hebrew. Yahweh's name in Hebrew is a Yod He Wad He, and you look at that same pictographic Hebrew and you look down, well, it's a man standing there and he's reaching down, and then you've got somebody reaching up. He's saying, look, I'm a father figure who is going to have you walk alongside me. I'm going to have you walk alongside me. I'm going to lift you up and walk alongside you as we go forward, right? Like that's what his name physically shows and represents. But we want to keep going away from the design, including school. Well, everybody goes to school. Yeah, maybe for the last 150 years, but what happened before that? Before that, the design was you grow up in your family. You're educated there, because education isn't just the reading, writing, arithmetic. It's how to live life. Dads are responsible for showing you what that looks like.
That's good.
There's a lot, man.
Man. That is so good. I'm just 100% behind your mission. I really love what you guys are doing, and that you're bringing this nationwide. To me, like when you're saying all that, like something that's been hit me a lot is the accountability almost that men need. Like, and you kind of maybe naturally would get that in the public square, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on accountability for men? Right. And it's like, sometimes you think it's like, oh no, that's your family. You do you, and then there's some aspect to that, but, feel like I've thrived under accountability, even if I didn't want to be a part of it. For instance, like soccer, like I wanted to be on the team. I didn't necessarily want the coach to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong and like to, change, but I actually thrived under the accountability,
Yeah. I mean, all I say this with education and accountability. All education is self-education. All accountability is self-accountability at the end of the day, right? Somebody else can give you something, but you ultimately have to accept it. I can say, hey, Jeff, man, I'm giving you this pen right here. This is yours. But if you're like, dude, I don't want it, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it from you. Oh, I can't go tell everybody I gave Jeff a pen. I can say I tried, but Jeff didn't take it. Right? Education and accountability, those are all the same sort of thing. So I think we do need that accountability side of it. I think everybody can use that. The question is, where do you respond to it so that it becomes as internal as it possibly can, right? And I think so for a lot of us, it is a tribe, it is a team, right? And so sports are great for that. It's a microcosm of life in so many ways. And that's one of those. Is like, okay, I'm responsible not just for myself, but I'm responsible for my team too. So each man should take a look at himself and go, okay, who's my team? Who's my tribe? Who do I, is it the people in the church? Is it, do I get all the accountability I need from God, and I have my relationship right there dialed in to where that's my accountability and I'm solid? Or do I need some other brothers around me that are also going through this, and some other guys that are my team? Where do I get that accountability? And I don't think it's bad to layer multiple levels of that in there. Our guys in our dad's program, like, they examine, how am I accountable to God himself? Like, what does that look like? How am I accountable? How do I act that out? How am I accountable to my family? And I've got a tribe of brothers around here. I've got an entire group, like we've got our entire class that holds this standard of accountability with leadership involved too. But we also have these smaller units, and we're tracking, the actions to make sure that our actions are lining up with what we say, we want to be and who we want to be. So the accountability matters. And I think it's up to each man to make sure that he has enough levels in there that, he's doing what he says he's going to do.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot of motivation to kind of built in. That's like if you looked at me as a man and actually saw all the play, I don't want to show anyone that, for that places I'm failing is what I mean, or the things I'm embarrassed about.
For sure.
And if someone peered into that, and if I knew you were going to look into that next week, I'd be like, I'm cleaning that up this week.
Now I'm going to clean that up. That's exactly it, man. And that's the whole point, right? As we talk about, all these different pillars, and am I aligned with what I'm saying? Some of our guys are going through are in the spiritual month right now, where they're taking a look at that going, I've always said this about God. I say the word relationship, but I don't actually listen to him. I just talk at him when I think I need something, but I don't actually listen. I only believe this because I grew up being told I was supposed to believe it. I've never actually gone into looking at it myself, right? Let's dive deeper. Okay, so what does that look like there? What does it look like to actually love and take care of my wife? What are the daily habits? What are the actions behind that? So that I'm not just saying it. What are the actions, right? We take a look at we're putting a spotlight on every single facet of the man's life, because the reality is all of us are better at some areas than we are at others, but we should really be pursuing perfection in every single one. That's what we're here for. Perfection is not possible. It is not possible in any area. But if we just acknowledge that and then stop and just use that as an excuse not to get better, then we're fooling ourselves. The pursuit of perfection is absolutely possible. And that's the standard that we should keep, right? Our standard for ourselves in all these areas of faith and fitness and family and finances and all of those areas, right? That you got on your shirt right there, right? Our standard right there is perfection for every one of them. Yeah. That's our standard.
Yeah.
Period. Will we ever hit it? No. Do we ever stop climbing towards it? Absolutely not. And that's why we named it apogee, right? Apogee means you are getting to the top of you're ascending to the top of the mountain, right? You're not at the peak, but you're at the apogee. You're ascending, because that's forever the game that we are here on. Until we're 6 feet under, we should be ascending in every one of those levels, every one of those areas.
So good. I've honestly, I've been wrestling with this perfection thing, because I think there's an aspect that some men, or let's say fathers, there's this piece where you're just like, God, I'm not as good as that guy. I'm not this, I'm not that. And there's a piece that mentally you need to know. And I try to say it like this: perfection, you are perfect. You are the perfect man for that job, positionally, to love your wife and to love those kids. And so positionally, there's perfection. You already have it, because that's where you're at. Now, I like that you guys I like the apogee piece. That helps me make sense of this, but you're still on the climb. And so
always.
Don't ever get depressed, because I think some guys get into a place where it's like, dude, and it's like all just this downward spiral. As soon as you get into some fighting with your wife and depression, and then you're in the mix of kids and emotions, and then parenting gets sucky because you just don't got the right skills, and you don't have help, and then people are walking away from this beautiful thing that they built just during a storm, and maybe it's a long storm, maybe it's like a year or two storm.
Sure.
And you're isolated, but you're still the perfect guy for that. Even though you're in the storm and it looks like a mess, that can be fixed. So don't walk away from it. Get the apogee. You're on the climb. Don't go back down the mountain. You have to keep moving forward. And so
that's it. And get a tribe around you, man, and get some people that are helping pull you up. We tell these guys, every one of these mountains, some of these guys are, we have guys in our, in our brotherhood that are ridiculously out of shape. And we've got we have literal Olympic athletes. We have guys who are really struggling to pay the bills each month and to pay the membership. And we got guys who are, worth multiple millions of dollars. We've got everybody in between. So everybody's, you look at all of those different mountains, you're at a different spot on that mountain, right? And in one
Mm,
mountain, I may be way ahead of you, but in the other mountain, you're way ahead of me. And either
mm,
way, we're climbing up, and your job is to keep climbing. Your job is to reach your hand up so that those who are ahead of you, you're following their footsteps. You're looking at their patterns. You're allowing them to speak into you and know, here's where you step next, and here's where you step next. And you're like, okay, here I go. But at the same time, you also have a hand backwards and you're pulling somebody else up behind you who's not quite where you are yet. Right? You're
I like
pouring into
that.
somebody else and you're going up that mountain. And you might have only a few people ahead of you because you're really good at this mountain. You only have a few people ahead of you and you got a ton back here. Well, cool. Then your job is to still listen to the few and to help the many. Or you might be on the mountain where you're part of the many because you're just not there yet. And you need to listen to all those people who are ahead of you there. You need to figure that out, pull up who you can until you get up to the top of the mountain where you've got a whole lot more that you're pouring into than being poured into from, right? That's the journey, always and forever.
I love that. I've climbed some mountains in my past, and dude, it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's a grind, and you're just
Yeah.
in it, and your legs are burning, like, but you're getting close to that. You want that view, right? Like you get up there and you just take the pack off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think families like that sometimes, or in life, like there is plateaus of like, there's some like enjoyment there, but you're
Sure.
not done. Right.
Sure.
So I like the fact that you guys are saying, no, there's multiple mountains. Like this is just the one right now.
This is just the one right now, man. That's it. And
That's
you might
so,
switch. Yeah. You might switch
I'm
mountain to
liking
mountain
that.
past that. You might have, 5 or 6 that you're climbing on any given day.
That's neat. So you're talking about there's a spiritual side to the program. So are you guys Christian focused, or just open to whatever? Where
Yeah.
does the core values of the spiritual
Yeah.
side come from?
It's a good question, man. So we want every month there's a different project and a different, kind of a different challenge, right? And there's a series of things that the guys are challenged to do, and they get points for each particular one. And so the spiritual focus, and again, not that we don't ever talk about whatever if there's a financial month, it's not like finances don't come up the rest of the year. That's not the case. It just
Sure.
means that is the focus for the month. So, in the spiritual focus of that, what we do is we take that and we add in communication and logical fallacies, and we add in a whole bunch of things that have to do with like rules of engagement on a good conversation and what that looks like for you in all the areas that you're having conversations. And we actually ask them to steel man their spiritual beliefs. So what we do is, because we know guys have different faith backgrounds, right? We have guys in the group
Yeah.
that are Protestant. We have guys in the group that are Catholic. We have guys in the group that are LDS. We got guys in the group that are Jewish. We got guys in the group that are, it's like, hey, man, I kind of grew up in the church, but I've kind of gone away. And so now I'm more on just kind of the spiritual side, but I don't really know what that means, right? And we've got guys. So we have all these different guys coming from these different backgrounds. So, well, here's what's important is that we're able to have these open discussions, right? So we want to talk about the civil discourse part of that. What are the rules of engagement for a good conversation so that I can say, hey, Jeff, here's what I believe. And here's
Mhm.
why I believe it. Jeff, what do you believe? I want to take a look at your evidence. I'm going to go ahead and be open-minded enough to where this isn't an emotional conversation. It's an evidence-based conversation. So if you bring me better evidence, well, shoot, I'm going to go ahead and be willing to change my mind if better evidence is presented, right? But either way, if I think you didn't bring a good enough, amount of evidence, I'm going to show you what mine is, and then maybe we agree to disagree for now, and we'll come back to it later, right? But we want to be able to have that civil discourse, which people have lost in society. So we're
So
getting the
good.
guys able to do that. We're having them examine logical fallacies, because there's a lot of places in spiritual conversations where logical fallacies get thrown out there. Appeal to authority, appeal to faith, so
Yeah.
they can take a look and see, well, when am I doing that too? Or I'm just saying it because this is what I grew up saying, but I haven't actually, gone deeper and to take a look at it. And then on the steel manning side, A lot of people know
Steel
about
is
that,
in the metal.
as in the metal. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
we talk about the straw man arguments. Well, steel man, what we do is we actually have you take a look and try to disprove yourself, disprove your own beliefs, because we want people, like, there's no point in saying we're going to dive into spirituality if all we really mean is we're going to tell you all the same stuff that everybody tells you all the time. That's just the surface level, rah echo chamber. Like, no, let's dive into, where would somebody come and go, here's where you're wrong. Do it to yourself, so that we can actually start to grow, right? What is Yisrael, right? What does that mean? It means to wrestle with, to contend with, right? We're supposed to contend with it, not supposed to just parrot what we've heard. So let's contend with it. So these guys dive in and try to disprove themselves, and have great conversations around that whole thing. So yeah,
Wow.
it's a powerful month, man. It's a
That
powerful focus.
that is powerful. I'm not sure where you got that, but to me it really resonates in the sense that when a gentleman challenged me with the words audit your beliefs, so
Yeah.
it's similar,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay,
Yep.
interesting. Let's do that because it should hold up if it's true, and if it doesn't hold up, why would you keep it? And
Bingo.
for
That's
a
the
guy
and
like me, go ahead.
But that's it, man. So what you just said right there, I don't want to gloss over that, because that's where you really start to become aware of what's actually holding you back in a lot of areas. So people live in fear. The vast majority, I've come to believe, the vast majority of people live in fear in one area, and it's usually uh, other people's opinions of them, and it's either their
Mm.
friends, their family, right? It's people that are close to them. They care a lot about what those people think, and people will say, "Oh man, I don't care what they think. I don't care. I'm my own man. I'm my own." Okay, cool. Well, if you learn that school is your enemy, are you willing to pull your kids out? If you truly learn it and you see it, are you willing to make that decision? Are you willing to pull them out once you have that? Well, my mom would think I'm crazy, or the people next to me, or the parents, next door won't think I'm a good parent anymore. I'll lose. We start talking about faith, and you start going, okay, if you question the common narrative and go, man, okay, I'm actually coming to a different conclusion just on this part. Okay, well, now your wife's pissed. Well, now people at church don't want to talk to you because you're a pariah, right? Because you're thinking about, like, it's a tough thing to be brave enough to do that.
Wow.
It's hard.
No, yeah, this is good. I love what you guys are doing. And that you have this peace in there. This is amazing. People live in fear. And
Man.
we kind of went through something like this too, where, I went to Bible school. Like, so I became a believer really at 21, I started walking with him. And it was like, I finished maybe another year of school and some college soccer. And I was like, I got to go to Bible school. And it was
Yeah.
good. There's some indoctrination, of course, but it's a foundation too. And then just over time, it's like you just don't realize how much programming is in you from other people that may or may not be true. And they're not that they have bad intentions, in church, but it's just what they were given. And it's gone on for thousands of years, just
And
keeps
just
passing
gone.
on
Just keeps
until something wakes you up, or God sends a prophet or some kind of thing that, like, okay, well then what's true? Because we're doing this, but what's really true?
right.
And we got off. It was like, say, 300 years ago, they just went 1 degree off. But now that we're like 300 years later, dude, we're miles apart.
Miles apart. And that's how it happens. And what's unfortunate, and that's why we want our men to have these great conversations without, and trying to take the emotions out of it. So we go, okay, well, what does a good conversation look like? And it's not that emotions are bad, but emotions can cloud, it can cloud your ability to communicate. One of the most dangerous things in communication is assuming that it's happened, right? You want to make sure that communication's actually taken place, and emotions tend to cloud that. So we tend to, if we hear something that triggers us emotionally, rather than sit with what just triggered us and go, is that true or untrue? We tend to, and again, blanket statements, some people are better at this than others, but we tend to take a look at the other person that just exposed us to that and go, well, you're the enemy. right? Which is that's such a dangerous spot to be, because we ruin relationships there, and then we refuse to dive into, we set ourselves in this emotional tailspin. So, and people always, okay, well, give me an example. Okay, I don't care where anybody goes on this. I just, here's something that is factually easy to find out. And we're talking about faith. So I'll throw something out there from a faith standpoint. You go to church. Let's assume we go to a Christian church. We go, okay, the name above all names. Right? And we sing songs like that. What's the name that we use? What's the name that we use? What would you say, Jeff? We say the name above all names. He is the
I would say
Son.
people would say, or Jesus, or some people just
Jesus,
say
right? Sure.
God, or
Jesus, yeah. And we'll say Jesus, and because that's what everybody's. Isn't it interesting, factually, that, and assuming if people again listen to this don't have a, they don't believe in that, that's fine. But
sure.
let's assume that he existed. Isn't it interesting factually that nobody ever called him that to his face while he was alive? Isn't it
Exactly.
interesting? Right?
It's not his name.
It's not his name. The letter J wasn't even invented. That's factual, right?
Yeah.
It's not Matt trying to mess with you. But if I say that, people are like, oh, okay, you must be the devil. It's like, wait, what? I'm just telling you a fact. I didn't
Yeah.
create this fact. It is a fact. I'm not even telling you what to think about the fact. I'm saying, are you thinking about it? And what's your conclusion around it? And most people are like, well, I've never even thought of it, and I don't want to. And I hate you for bringing it up. And I'm like, dude, that's how my mind works. I go, man, as soon as I figured that part out, I went, okay, well, then that couldn't have been his name. So nobody ever walked up to him and said, hey, Jesus, what's up? Like, nobody ever said that to him.
Sure.
So does that matter? That's all I'm asking people to consider is, does that matter? What does that mean? Does that change anything? Does it not? Just think about it. That's all I'm saying. Right. But just because I ask people to think, and I'm challenging a commonly held thing, now all of a sudden I'm some sort of, man, we got to get out of that, and so we want, and that's not just in the faith journey, it's in all
Sure.
areas of life. It's so dangerous.
Man, that's so good. Like, I feel like talking about even a faith thing like that, and you like say you go against like the Christians, like it's like a big thing, like, okay, predestination type of
Sure.
thing, Jesus's return, a
Sure.
pre-trib. These are things that can trigger people,
Sure.
telling them to do anything because Jesus kept the whole law, but so if they don't have to.
There's so many places
Like
that
there's
nobody
just
wants
so
to
many
talk about.
places, and you try to have these conversations, and on it, to me, sometimes like once emotions get in, it's just you just lost it. Like
Dude, it's
it's
a
like,
done deal.
and so I appreciate that you guys are teaching conversation without emotion. And I think, how you said your kids, like a lot of what you learn is more by like just
Yes, sir.
imitating you.
Correct.
And I think for like me, when I was a young believer too, it was like, and I mean, still today, I learned a lot just by watching other people that you're around at, church.
Yes, sir.
And you pick up some of the good and you pick up some of the bad.
Yes,
And
sir.
I think we tend to like red flag people. And you said like, hey, you're my enemy if you don't agree with, me. And it's like, oh, you're Mormon? Oh, dude, you're the enemy unless you become a Christian. And it's like,
Right.
where did that ever serve anyone? And even example wise, I always bring this up, like Jesus literally revealed himself as the Messiah, like almost first to a woman who was a Samaritan. Okay. And so that's like, he's American and he's like, oh, I'm going to go to Mexico and then tell this like Roman Catholic, like, that's like equivalent. It's like, why would you do that? And it's like, or because he didn't have these boundaries. He saw the person and the person's valuable. They might not be where you're at. You're not where they're at. But when we red flag people, like because of our denomination, because of our religion, like
We shut
you
down.
just cut yourself off from even helping somebody, right?
Communication's gone.
Communication is gone because you
Communication.
block in your mind, you won't have it.
Bingo. You automatically label, like, we have been, again, trained. You put people in a specific box, and you're either in my box or you're in another box, and
Yeah.
that's it, right? And if you're in this other one, man, we can't. Then we're not going
Well,
to
then I'm
jive.
scared to talk to you. And you talked about fear. And
That's right.
coming
That's
to the
exactly.
place and belief where it's like, okay, God doesn't need me to like defend him. Like he either, if he is true, it is just gonna be true. Like I don't have to have, you know, be scared that someone is gonna like, oh my
And
gosh,
that's
you're
it.
gonna,
And you don't need to be scared to upgrade your belief system either,
yeah,
right? It's okay. Like one of the problems with, in the modern church, I believe is that we get to a point where we're like, okay, I know what I need to know. I'm all set. And so I'm all done. I'm all done. I got it all now. No, you don't. Dude, we can spend all day diving into who God is for the rest of our lives, however long that is.
well,
And we're not going to get anywhere close. But we
yeah,
use that as an excuse not to try to get closer. And I think that is a massive mistake. I've learned more in this past decade diving into the Hebrew and diving into the Dead Sea Scrolls and looking at the translations and really considering and thinking through all that stuff than I have at any church in 2 decades.
wow,
It's
same,
just the reality of it, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing to learn more about who God is. And it's brought up even more questions than I had 10 years ago, right? I feel like I've learned more and I know less simultaneously. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm glad. I'm thankful for that, because I've stayed curious on those things, and it's and not dogmatic. And so again, I'm open to these conversations, and like we should do that because again, the truth doesn't need to be covered. It will always defend itself. So why aren't
yes.
we actually pursuing it? Because we're afraid.
That's so good. I feel like I've come to a place in my journey too where it's like I call it just maturity. And I like that you said like, dude, I'm learning more than ever, but I don't
Yes,
know as
and
much as I've ever known. I'm like, it's to me, it's like
here,
this humbling place that God truly wants you to be in. Um, because now you're the right kind of person, right? To say, okay, I'm not better than you. I just, like I think it's C.S. Lewis. I've just been in the hospital a little bit longer than you. We're in the same
yeah,
hospital. I've just been here a
yep,
little longer.
that's
And,
it.
and so anyways, like I am open to more conversations with other people. And it's just as you
Yeah,
get some of the religious things you've learned, and maybe they protect you out of time and there's a purpose and a place for that. But as you mature out of it, I just feel more free, to be honest. I feel
yeah,
better.
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like that's the way it's got to be. And again, your relationships will get better all the way around too. If you stop doing the box this and the box that. It's funny when we do it in so many areas. We do it in faith. We do it in culture and the identity politics game. That we've been sucked into as well. This whole left. It's argued left versus right versus it's like holy dude. We hosted. I hosted Joe Jorgensen at one of my campuses in California, and she was running for president as the Libertarian candidate, right? And so we hosted her Northern California speaking event, and so had her there. She did a speaking event at one of my campuses, and went out to dinner with her later, and it was cool getting to know her. And so, but what was interesting is, so they had reached out and they're like, "Hey, we'd love to host our event there at your campus. Would you be open to it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." They're like, "Would you introduce her on stage?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." They're like, "Awesome. Are you voting for her?" I'm like, "I don't really vote." And they're like, "Wait, what?" Like, I don't understand. I'm like, dude, this is a cool person. Sounds like she's trying to do some good things. Like, let's connect. Right. But while we were at the event, I also had, so I had people coming up to me like, "Oh my gosh, that's so great to know you're a libertarian." I'm like, I don't play politics really. I don't get into it. I don't vote. And they're like, "What?" And I had somebody else come up to me and go, "Wait a second, why are you hosting Joe Jorgensen? Like, I see the way you run these campuses. You got the students that really get to express their voice. You're clearly a Democrat. Like, why are you hosting?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't vote." And then I had people come up to me and they're like, "Hey, you got a beard. You're wearing a suit. I can tell you are you packing right now?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a 38 right here." They're like, "Well, clearly you're a Republican. So what's going on?" I'm like, "I don't vote." And so it's like, but everybody wants to. They're like, "Wait, what is the label for you?" It's a weird thing that we've been trained into, man.
Yeah, we have to understand you. So you got to fit a box that we already know about. And you just
Right.
made a whole new miscellaneous box for people.
Totally. Yep. And it scares the hell out of people.
Yeah. Oh man. So I really am like, where did you come up with this core beliefs? Like where did this all stem from? Like, is it your parents? Is it your grandparents? Like, is it just you've learned over time? Like,
Yeah. It's a good question, man. I always say I've been gifted with a couple of things. I'm woefully inadequate in almost everything. I suck at almost everything. But I do believe God's given me, a couple of gifts. One of those is the ability to see patterns, and the other one is the ability to understand people pretty well, and I like people. I really love humans, and I think they're fascinating, and I can put those two things together, and I can see a lot of patterns in people. And so that's been wildly beneficial. And I've been in enough experiences to get a pretty unique human experience on the good side and on the bad side, and so all these different experiences of, well, I turned down the White House job because somebody in the White House kind of exposed, like, hey, there's a little bit of stuff going on here in politics that the public isn't usually given access to. Let me give you a little bit of access to this. Here's why you don't want to go into this job. And it's like, okay, cool, interesting, good to know. And then I see the school game from the inside, right? And learn there's money in politics. And I'm like, okay, well, there's something going on here. I'm able to build out educational systems, and you see amazing, beautiful stories come out of there. And it's like, okay, well, I can see the patterns of what actually creates educated, happy, peaceful individuals over here. Part of while I was building out these schools, I've gotten to speak on stages to 500,000 people at this point around the world. A lot of these are Fortune 500 companies that are bringing me in, partially because they're going, hey, we're hiring all these college graduates who really suck at things. We want to fire all of them, help us to help them, right? They're good at school, but they're not good at life. And so I'm seeing things from that perspective, including working with some amazing clients. And I'm like, ooh, I see the best in humanity. And I'm working with some clients where I'm like, I'll never work with that organization again because that's super sketchy, right? So it's really been this continuous, almost introspection and revisiting my thoughts and beliefs and all of these different patterns as I'm seeing all these play out, and just questioning the systems, and school's got this, but education shows this. So I see the good, I see the bad. On the religious side, right, I've seen the bad sides of churches and that kind of group mentality that doesn't go well. And I've seen, what I think is the upside. And I've seen, I've learned more about who I believe God really is. And so it's an obsessive look at patterns. It's really that.
That's interesting. Dude, like,
Yeah.
some of the top
Better or worse.
leaders and entrepreneurs, creative, like, I'm just thinking of two people, but they have similar gifts that have served them pretty well. But but they're on the outside though of typical
And
society.
it's kind of the way that's kind of the way it's going. Yeah, which is okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know a little bit more about you, Matt. I want to ask one more thing. Like, where does entrepreneur fit in with entrepreneurship? Sorry, over like having a job. I'm looking at your books back here: .com secrets, expert secrets, and okay. So usually, just the typical employee is not going to have those type of books. So
yeah, I'm an HR nightmare. I was never a good employee, and I am absolutely unemployable at this point in my life. I always tell people freedom is my favorite F word. Freedom, sovereignty. I don't want to answer to anyone or anything that is not of my choosing, and whether that's a character flaw or a feature. I think sometimes it's both. But that's where I land on that. But I think there's also, entrepreneurship is a microcosm for real education. It's a microcosm for why we're here. I think we're here for sovereignty and freedom. And I think that's ultimately what we're designed for and what we're supposed to get after. Because, in my mind, when you really get to that place of freedom, you get out of that cage. We use that word slavery earlier. It's not that you're necessarily in physical slavery. You're more in mental slavery. And I think, the entrepreneurship journey is a journey into mental freedom and mental peace. And that's really what I want for everybody else. That's why everything that we're doing is to get other people to that spot. Like, that's our business. We're in the business of freedom. I'm in the business of making people pick up the pen to write their own script, and write a story that they're proud of, and write a story that they're happy about, and write a story that brings them peace, where they wake up every day and there's joy. It doesn't mean the obstacles go away, but there's joy, and they're intentional, and they don't feel like somebody else is telling them what to do, when to do it, and any other place. And that's what I want for everybody. So for me, entrepreneurship is that vehicle. It's that vehicle for freedom, vehicle for peace.
So good. Is there any piece of apogee that's part, teaches that, or is that
Very much
part of
so.
apogee?
Yeah,
Okay.
very much so. Yeah, our young heroes are all launching businesses, even if it's not
So
that I think
amazing.
everybody should be an entrepreneur, not that everybody has to be an entrepreneur, but I want them to understand the values that teaches, and the opportunities, the life lessons that you learn through that, I think are invaluable, for anybody. So they're all launching businesses or taking their businesses into perpetuity. On the dad's side, again, we got a lot of men who are already entrepreneurs and running businesses. So we're helping them, to do that more intentionally and more efficiently. And for those that want to get into that, that's where where the affiliation comes in too, is we want to give you the opportunity. If you want to step outside of corporate America and you want to take this and go help others, and perpetuate this mission, we want you to be able to do that. And then we dive into, some of the other areas that, we take a look and go, where are you not free? Like, part of our move to the mountains here of North Carolina is, well, let's assume everything goes sideways, and all of a sudden there's no food in the grocery stores, and money doesn't work anymore. Well, then what? Well, I want to still have an answer to that too. And it's not a scared or a prepper or a psychotic mentality. I just want all areas of my life to be as self-sufficient as possible, because I think that's a great thing to do. So we've got food, and
Yeah.
we grow food, we got water, and I think it's a really cool skill to be able to learn. And I love, being on a homestead. So we're going to give that a shot. On the financial side, where are you still a slave to not just the job, but where are you a slave to the government, where you're making X amount of money, but you're giving, 30-40% of that away? Well, guess what? There are ways to get out of that too. There are ways to really, instead of giving the money to the government, where you can give the money to other people that you want to give. So why not play that game too? So we're teaching our guys, that there's that game to play too, because freedom really can be found in all of these areas. We're just not taught about it.
Man, that's great. Yeah, everything you've said about apogee just sounds amazing. So I'm going to say, from my perspective, so like, I want a school here, right? But what if I don't want to run it, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I love what you're doing. Like, I wish there was schools all over where I'm at that
Yeah.
have leadership that's like a guy like you has developed. I love this. So what are some of the options? So it's
that's on the school side, it's one of the hardest sides. Like, for our guys that want to go forward and they want to coach, right? If they want to launch something for other men or for other young men, that's an easier sell, because most of society sees that that's a need, right? And so on the school side, it's much harder, because again, we're talking about the biggest religion in our country is this schooling religion, right? So so that's a harder thing. So we can give, let's Jeff wants to start something cool. We can give, if Jeff's gone through and we know who Jeff is and he's a solid dude and he's ready to rock and roll, we can give you the template, give you the outline. But the biggest part of that, the hardest part of that, is finding the people. It's finding the right people to build out this tribe, because we can give you the how to, but you've got to be able to articulate the why and what this looks like. And you're going to be in the parent management business just as much as you are in the young person education business, right? So you're going to have to educate the parents along with it. And by the way, that's not a bad thing, right? I tell parents, we have a home education tribe as well. We got a couple hundred families that we walk through home education on here's how we do it. And here's how you can do it effectively. And we've got weekly calls, for them as well. Right. One of the things I always tell those parents is, by far and away, the best thing you can do to increase your child's level of education is to increase your own and then bring them along with you. Right? It's very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. My kids are used to conversations around taxes and cash flow and trust systems and P&Ls, and because it's just normal conversation around here. As I level up myself in understanding these things, I talk to them about it. I bring them along. They don't have to have the full understanding of everything at 12, 10, and 7, but they hear that and it becomes the normal conversation, right? We're not talking about the freaking Kardashians in our house. Nobody gives a crap, right? We're talking about things that matter. And so that's normal for them. So, you're doing the same thing. If you're launching a school anywhere in this country, you're doing the same thing. You're increasing your own education. You're increasing the education of the parents. You're talking to the parents about why, so that as you're educating on that campus, those kids are going home, and then the conversations are getting as close to matching as humanly possible. Right. And so that's part of what, will help these affiliates do. And I'll likely have to spend some time in the communities too, and go in there, have some conversations with the parents, get everybody on board, make sure the filtering systems are good so that we have the right community of folks going forward. And that's how you're going to end up hiring too, is you're going to filter through, people that are on a different side of the spectrum. There's specific filtering processes. There's ways we essentially unsell the entire program. And then it's the people that get excited about it that are like, no, hell no, like, we got to make this happen. Well, there's your pool.
There you go. That's neat. It seems like there's a huge, since COVID, like people's minds are opening up to homeschooling because they had to do it for like a while.
There are. Yeah, man. It's the first time, since compulsory schooling was made a thing in our country. It's the first time that we've been up to over 3 million homeschool kids. First time we've been up there since compulsory schooling, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, there's been a big shift. Now some are doing it because and I applaud all the parents that are, taking a look and considering it, and those that have taken the leap and are doing it. It's fantastic. One of the biggest struggles I hear from parents quite often is that, when they are struggling, it's because they're bringing school back at home, right? So I refer to it as a religion, as a cult, right? You got the cult of schooling that you've been raised to. Well, if you ever try to get anybody out of a cult, right, that's not a very easy thing to do, right? They grew up in a cult. And so then you're going to take them out and put them in society. They're going to be uncomfortable in society, right? What are they going to do to get comfortable? Well, they're going to try to do some of the cult things because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've always done.
Sure.
Right? And so one of the biggest things that, parents struggle with is they pull their kids out of school and then they start doing school at home. So I don't even like the term homeschool. I always say home educate, because schooling and education are different. Right. Yeah. And so people are trying to school at home. And I'm like, no. We got to get you out of the school mindset altogether, get you into the education mindset. That's a different thing. And so, we help as many parents as we can on that. But yeah, it's been great, man. That's the silver lining of all this craziness in 2020 on the education side, is that so many parents started to get a glimpse of the agendas. And even if they didn't know exactly why they were pulling, they didn't like the agenda they saw. The agenda has been there since you and I were kids. And before that, the agenda has been there. It's been this slow burn, but it's only going to ramp up. And so people that are wanting to fight back against the agenda, I get it. And I applaud you for wanting to fight, but you can't win this battle. You're not going to beat what's going to happen in our public schools. They're not going to change. Too much money, power, politics. It's already been in play for a long time. You have no chance. So take that same vigor and that same energy that you want to fight against something, and use that same energy instead to fight for your young heroes. Fight for a situation where you can bring them home, figure out your finances, figure out your schedule, whatever you can do so that you can bring them home. That's the fight that you fight, because you can win that fight. You're not going to change schools.
No, exactly. Yeah. And even going back to what you said, like when my wife went from teaching like in the public school and she was just a kindergarten teacher, but
Yeah.
doing my son, and it was like, she didn't like the first year because it
Mhm.
was like, this isn't working the way school works. And then gradually like learning to love it,
Mhm.
because it's totally something different.
It's
It's just,
very different, man. It's
yeah,
very different. It's not the same thing at all. Yeah, and good for her. I've been in kindergarten classes, and that's hard. That's very hard. So it's not just a
yeah.
kindergarten teacher. That's hard, man. For me, that was, and again, it's a DNA thing too. On an educator side, um, it was middle school, high school, college age, like simple for me. Where it scares the heck out of some people. Kindergarten. I mean, I can go in there. I'll spend some time in kindergarten, man, but I am toast at the end of the day. I'm
Yeah.
can't. That's so. God bless her, man. That's awesome. But yeah, it is. Schooling and education are vastly different. Everybody can home educate. You just got to get out of the school mindset.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Mhm.
I mean, with the way like wokeness and where the way like, man,
Yeah.
it's gonna get a lot different. Like
Oh yeah.
what they're gonna be pushing and the things that they can do, like even up in Washington State here without parents' permission, and
Yeah.
but it's like, oh man, like the state thinks they own your kids essentially,
Yep.
not you,
Yep.
and there's no
For
way
sure.
that their decisions should be above yours, as a parent.
But nope. But people
But
still send their. But people still send their kids, and that's crazy to me. And that's where I want people to see the system and see it for what it really is. Because I did a post today, and I kind of created like a little analogy because I'm trying to get people to see it. So it's like I said, it was something along the lines of like, if you grew up believing that everybody had to go to restaurants to eat when they were younger, right? And so you grew up going to all these restaurants, and that's all you did. That's where you got all your meals as a kid. And now you're doing the same thing. You're sending your kid to these restaurants for all three meals, and you believe that's where they get fed when they're young. But if you started to learn, or you learned and understood that those meals are going to be slightly poisoned, each one, just a little bit, right? It's a little bit of poison going into each meal for your kid. Would you say, oh my gosh, well, that's the way it's always been? And I guess, I mean, I'm not dead yet. And so I guess, I don't know. Or would you do everything in your power to pull them out and figure out, okay, well, I'm going to figure out how to feed them. Maybe it's going to have to increase my costs. Maybe it's going to screw up my schedule. Like, of course you would, man. You would do anything in your power to make sure they weren't being poisoned. Well, that's what's happening. It's what's happening. So once you realize it, you've got to do everything in your power to get them out so they're not being poisoned anymore. Right? It's that same thing, man. They're just being poisoned
mm,
up here.
which makes sense with what you said earlier, like it's not real slavery, but because they enslaved your mind is just programmed, like they did the programming to it,
Yep.
that you technically are, enslaved by something. And so,
Very much
which is
so.
yeah, and then another piece to that is that like employee is not a term in the New Testament or in the Bible anywhere. So like what really happened here? Like, does the Bible not talk about this, or is it that it does talk about slaves, servants, masters, right, and kings, essentially
Mhm.
rulers?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and anyways, like you can just see how that factory of school just creates employees that have to be told what to do. They have the bell rings and you do the next thing. Here's your task, get it done really fast, well, and whatever. Or real
And
life, go
yep.
ahead.
And be happy with the fact that you just get the quote unquote opportunity to go there when other people don't get the opportunity to go there, even though you hate it. um, that's just part of life. You're going to have to do something 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of your life that you hate, right? It's just programming that's the normal thing.
Yeah, yeah, and then
And
you're
then
right. They told you have to go do this, and then you have to
man,
go in debt to go to this school and get a degree and make,
F
you know,
off.
yeah. So, and you mean freedom off, right?
That's what I
F
meant. Freedom off. Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
That is
F
exactly
off.
right, brother. Freedom
Dude,
off.
that's a t-shirt right there. F
Dude,
off.
that is a
Freedom
t-shirt right
off.
there. I like that.
It's
Yeah.
a million
That's
million
awesome.
dollar idea.
That's awesome.
Well, oh Matt,
Awesome.
let's well, I kind of want to make sure people know where to find you and how to be a
Yes.
part of the great things that you guys are doing. So why don't you let us know how they should
Thanks,
get a hold
brother.
of you?
I appreciate that. We're redoing the entirety of we've got all of our sites in like different locations and little landing pages here and there. We've been doing all this without really a whole lot of tech, but right now everybody can just go to the apogeestrongprograms.com. It'll point you in all the different directions that we're going, or apogeestrongfoundation.org. That talks about the 501c3 and the mission overall. So both of those are good for now until we get something dialed in. And on Instagram, we're at Apogee Program, and people can reach out to me I'm most active probably on Instagram as well. It just my name. But no matter what, man, appreciate people paying attention, and being willing to have conversations and to push the envelope so that they don't live in fear anymore, man. That's all I wish for everybody.
That's great. So we'll make sure all that's in the show notes. And appreciate you coming on today, Matt.
Honor's mine, brother. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah. So with that being said, really speaking to fathers, we know that we talk about faith, family, finances, and fitness, and putting in the effort today and the energy in those areas so that in a year from now, you're thanking yourself for the decisions that you made. Your family is better off. Your relationship to your wife and kids is just way better. And so whether it's joining Matt's program, Apogee, whatever really fits you, go after those things, make a decision, put the energy and the effort into it. And so with that, if you found value in this, make sure you share this out with friends, hit the like button, leave us a review. All that helps grow the show and get more of the message out there. So with that, we'll catch you on the next one.